Coming up on MacBreak Weekly, I, Mikah Sargent, am subbing in for Leo Laporte while he's on vacation, and we have a great show ahead. First, Rosemary Orchard is here in person. So excited to have her here to join us for MacBreak Weekly, plus your regular cast of characters, Ihnatko, Alex Lindsay, and Jason Snell. We start the show off by talking about Katie Cotton, former Apple PR chief, who died just this last week. We talk about Apple PR during the Steve Jobs era, how things have changed over time, and share a few stories about interacting with Katie Cotton. Then we move on to talk about Apple's efforts to keep those retail stores from unionizing after Apple has seen one of its retail stores actually make the choice to unionize. We talk about iPhone 15 rumors, what we could expect there, Rivian, GM, and other electric car companies talking about how they don't want CarPlay and Android Auto in their vehicles, and how some burglars used an espresso machine store to break into an Apple store and make off with $500,000 worth of iPhones, iPads, and more. It's all that and then some coming up on MacBreak Weekly. Stay tuned.
Podcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is TWiT.
This is MacBreak Weekly, episode 865, recorded Tuesday, April 11th, 2023. Honking down their Snorkel. This episode of MacBreak Weekly is brought to you by ZocDoc. When you're not feeling your best and just trying to hold it together, finding great care shouldn't take up all your energy. Go to ZocDoc.com/MacBreak and download the ZocDoc app for free. Then find and book a top-rated doctor today. Many are available within 24 hours. And by Delete Me. Reclaim your privacy by removing personal data from online sources. Protect yourself and reduce the risk of fraud, spam, cybersecurity threats, and more by going to joindeleteme.com/twit and using the code TWIT for 20% off. And by ZipRecruiter. Did you know that hiring can take up to 11 weeks on average? Do you have that time to wait? Of course not. Stop waiting and start using ZipRecruiter. ZipRecruiter helps you find qualified candidates for all your roles fast. And right now, you can try it for free at ZipRecruiter.com/MacBreak. It's time for MacBreak Weekly, the show where Mackie people talk about Mackie things, all about Apple and iOS and iPhone and everything in between. It's the Apple News Hour, and I am your host this week, Mikah Sargent, in for Leo Laporte, who will be back at some point. I'm not checking the calendar, but maybe you all are. He'll be here, but I'm here for now. And joining me in the studio is my co-host on iOS Today, as well as a podcaster known around the world and an automations expert. It's Rosemary Orchard.
Hi, thanks for having me, Mikah. It is great to be in the studio for the third time on this trip because, we already did iOS today. We did Ask the Tech Geeks on Sunday, which was good fun.
Yeah, it was good fun having you, and I'm so glad you're here, and I'm so glad that we said, could you maybe join us for MacBreak Weekly too? And you were down for that. So we've got quite the panel here with us today as we've added an extra individual. So thank you for being here. Also here, but not here in person, but certainly close by, is the creator of sixcolors.com, as well as the Incomparable Network and a Relay FM podcaster. It's Jason Snell. Hello, Jason.
Hi, Mikah. I love that you are bringing a very different energy to the show than I brought last week as the guest host. And yes, Leo will return eventually. Also, great to have Rosemary on the show. That means it's less work for me and Andy and Alex. So thank you for let's hear it for laziness.
Wait. Nobody told me this.
Also nice to have two people I played Dungeons and Dragons with on this episode.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
Joining us also nearby, but also not in the studio, is the Office Hours Global creator. It's Alex Lindsay. Hello, Alex.
I'm good. I'm just upset that I haven't gotten to play Dungeons and Dragons with some people who are evidently there's games going on that I don't know about, and
they're posted. So
yeah, they we'll have
not a secret.
It's
I used to be quite a dungeon master in my day.
Oh wow! What edition?
First edition.
Oh, okay.
Edition.
So it's been a while.
Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, not the basic dungeon. So I was the first DM and monster manuals from the first advanced edition, but the basic one was still a little too basic. But I might have to learn a couple of new things.
Joining us from much farther away, rather. So also not joining us in the studio from WGBH in Boston, it's Andy Ihnatko. Hi, Andy.
I'm like the Secretary of Agriculture during the State of the Union, where I'm legally bound by congressional rules to stay away just in case something awful happens at the other end of the broadcast, so that MacBreak can continue to legislate from beyond. But thank you very much. I'm glad that we're talking about Mackie things. I was very excited. I did binge watch and refresh myself on all 7 seasons of The Shield right before. Breaking Bad is not the pioneer that people think it is. I mean, the Michael Chiklis's portrayal of Vic Mackey, and from the very, very beginning through 7 seasons, and his descent from being mischievous cop into actual evil, I think is one of the bellwethers of primetime cable drama. So I'm glad we're finally getting a chance to talk about this during our Mac Theme podcast.
Hey, Andy, I thought that we would be discussing the costume design for the Carol Burnett show, which was done by Bob Mackey.
Yes, thank you.
My mistake.
The famous Scarlett O'Hara window dress. I mean, that is an icon not only of television and comedy, but of fashion.
I have to admit, that was the Mackie I was thinking of after I decided to say Mackie things. But I'm glad that there's more than one Mackie we could talk about on the show today.
We're missing Mackie D's.
Oh, yes. Mackie D's, famous for the Big Mac. Let's get into the show this week, actually kicking things off with some rather sad news. The former Apple PR chief, Katie Cotton, we just learned, has died. In fact, passed away on April 6th, so Thursday, last Thursday as we're recording this show. I believe Katie Cotton worked at Apple as head of PR for more than 20 years. And I was hoping that we could hear a little bit about you folks as journalists, your experience with Katie Cotton, perhaps herself, but also with her PR team, and maybe how things have changed over time. We'll start with Jason.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I worked with Katie Cotton quite a bit and with her team. She predated Steve Jobs returning to Apple slightly, but I think that Steve Jobs found a kindred spirit in Katie Cotton. She was, how much of it was her philosophy and how much of it was her sort of marching to the tune that Steve wanted her to march by, but they created how should I put this? Before Katie took over Apple PR, it was a mess. As what I would say in the mid 90s, we couldn't get answers to our questions. We would get told we would get calls back and they wouldn't be called back. I would say that they were much more disciplined. At the same time, I mean, as Katie famously said, my job is not to make the press happy. My job is to sell Apple products, right? Like that, in the end, that is what PR's job is. And none of us forget that they are not our friends. You can be friendly with them, but their job is to promote Apple. That's why they get paid. And so I would say she kept a very disciplined, tightly controlled PR outfit. They would let you know if you wrote something that they didn't like. They were actually very aggressive about that. I personally, I had a few extended conversations with her. I found her extremely intimidating. That's people were like, what do you remember about Katie Cotton? I was like, I was afraid of her. That is how I feel about her. She was just kind of scary because she spoke with authority, and you knew that she had the full force and support of everybody at Apple, including Steve Jobs behind her. What's interesting about how things have changed since she left, they really had a changing of the guard, although there are a lot of people who kind of came up from Katie's organization. It really has been a changing of the guard there. And I think it's a natural thing that like Apple PR in the late 2010s, it started looking at ways of doing PR that were going to be a different playbook than it would have been in the late 90s and early 2000s. It's just natural. Mm-hmm. And so they've changed the access. There was an old playbook for who got access to what and what level. And, Walt Mossberg gets to come in and get everything. And then, maybe we'll call Jason eventually. And all that sort of stuff happened. And they changed that, and they've got more YouTubers involved. Like, it's just more modern. I think that's just a natural thing that happens when you're going by one playbook and then another. And then Steve Jobs leaving too. I think that Katie Cotton really did run that PR group like Steve wanted her to, and it was a little bare knuckles at times. Like, we're going to punish the people who displease us, and we're going to reward the people who please us. And that still happens, but I don't know. I think Steve was much more adversarial. I'll put it that way. And I think that Katie's PR group reflected that. And apologies, because this is kind of inside baseball. You people on the outside would have gotten this sort of secondhand, right? Based on what access and what was going on the inside to the people in the media. And then you would see the end result of that. But I think Tim Cook's Apple, a little more soft touch. Doesn't mean they're not selling products. They absolutely are, but maybe a little more of a soft touch. Whereas I think that Steve was happy to rattle the cages of the media, and Katie was happy to be the cage rattler too. Yeah.
You say inside baseball, and as we know, it takes about 2.5 hours for the folks to leave the baseball game. So at least for a while, I find this incredibly interesting. I'm curious, Andy, to hear your experience, and then I do kind of want to hear more about how a PR group can approach that conversation of what you wrote is not something we're happy with versus maybe what you wrote is not factually correct. Here's some stuff to correct that. So, but Andy, what was your experience during that time?
I have actually, that's a good question, because I know exactly like the story to talk about, like where I was when the Apple versus Samsung lawsuits were really, really just deep and personal and furious. I was writing a lot about it. I was really sort of skeptical, downright, and sometimes downright, oh, come on, Apple, put it together. You're making lots of arguments that just do not stand up to scrutiny. And yeah, I did get a couple of phone calls from Apple about, hey, let's have a group call. And when it wasn't, but what I appreciated about it was that it wasn't, let's make sure Andy understands that if he doesn't play ball with us, we can make life very difficult for him. It was, we're going to have a very, very direct conversation about, we don't understand like we're going to explain to him directly why we feel the way we feel about certain things. And so long as you understood that relationship, so long as you still had if you knew that you still had the ability to push back. I mean, I had some, I don't want to call them arguments, because arguments, and the word argument implies emotion, as opposed to very, very like two people who are like, I'm going to stand my ground and you have to convince me that I'm wrong. And I don't think I'm wrong. Like I specifically remember when they're trying to get at me about how like Samsung's designs. And I said, look, I have in my possession a kitchen scale made well before the iPhone that is the shape of an iPad with rounded corners and a round button at the bottom. And you're saying that Apple has no one else has ever done this. I have in my possession a Palm OS device that predates the iPhone. That is a rounded corner rectangle device dominated by a screen with a rounded button on the bottom. I remember these conversations going on, but also again not feeling as though I'm being taken to the woodshed. Unfortunately, like since she left, I do think that Apple has turned a little bit into that bad territory of this. If you're not helping to promote sometimes it feels as though you get the impression that they're saying our relationship is so that we want you to promote our products. If you're going to be skeptical or questioning things in any way, or if you're trying to do your job as a journalist and seeking information from sources that we didn't approve, we're going to find out about it and we're going to let you know we're unhappy about it. And I don't want anybody to read into that and think that it's more intense than what I'm suggesting, but that is something where, like, again, you go into the acceptable losses of what happens when you do your job properly, and certainly the acceptable losses after Katie Cotton left Apple are a little bit more intense than they used to be before then. But yeah, she was tough, but very, very fair. And I think that if anybody who I would like to see someone say the exact same things about a male head of PR that they were saying about Katie when she retired. But oh God, thank God she's gone because she was mean spirited and she did that. No, that's no different from what a lot of other PR people do. Mm-hmm. I wonder in this tech industry, I wonder what could possibly be different about these two people causing such negative commentary about.
I wonder what that is. Yeah, Alex, from the sort of streaming event engineering video side of things, did you ever have any interactions that you can talk about with Katie Cotton or her team?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely had some not from a streaming perspective, but coverage that we did, had some interactions with her, and for me, all the interactions are really good. So I'm not very confrontational though, because I have to admit that I tend to be understand the food chain and understand where I sit in it. And so I was very low in the food chain and I didn't try to act like a shark when I was only a minnow. So I was just happy to be there, and generally, and I caused enough trouble that when I didn't get invited back, I knew why. But I didn't. I kind of understood what that was. But I didn't, it wasn't like, with a lot of PR, it doesn't oftentimes show up as confrontation. You just don't get the invite the next time.
Right.
And a lot of times it's not even, and a lot of times it's not, I mean, because what's interesting is I've worked on the other side longer now than I covered things. And so I'm used to being not so much at Apple, but in other places where I'm in those conversations. And a lot of times there's limited number of seats that they have available for the press, and they pick the ones obviously that are the most advantageous for them. It's actually a limited resource. It's not a punitive thing for a lot of them. It's like, we have a section and this is how many seats have been given to us for PR, and they fill them with the ones that are going to make the most difference for them. And I think people make it out to be much more drama driven than it is. It's just like, well, it's not that you're on the blacklist. You're just not on the top of the list that is getting invited to this event because of X, Y, and Z.
And just very quickly, a journalist can do their job without getting help from Apple, without getting help from Microsoft. Yeah. So that the fact that you weren't invited to this rollout event doesn't mean they're trying to control you or trying to control the press. It means that, well, guess what? You are going to go to the Apple store and you're going to buy one of these things, and that's how you're going to get a hold of one. If you're committed to doing your job, you can still do your job no matter what a PR company wants you to do or doesn't want you to do.
Yeah, it just makes it more inconvenient, and there's some hope there that by making it inconvenient for you, they're sending a message. It's like a little like dog training or something. It's like, oh, you did a bad thing, and now you're gonna. I mean, we had that. We had a round of layoffs, big surprise media layoffs, and a favorite person. I won't mention who it was, but a favorite person of Apple PR was among the layoffs. And the next Apple event that was held, Macworld did not get a briefing, did not get advanced product, had to go buy it at the Apple store ourselves. And then it was back to normal after that. And it was very clearly them expressing their displeasure about one of our people that they liked being laid off. And it's like, interesting, a little punitive, sort of strangely, because like, it's not like people enjoy laying people off, but and then they piled on with punishment when we felt sort of punished enough by having to lay off some of our people. But I do have one really quick Katie Cotton story, which is the one thing that has stuck in my mind most of anything that in terms of how I've interacted with her. And it's that for the 20th anniversary of the Mac, so 2004, I got an interview with Steve Jobs, and it was height of the iPod era, and it took us a year to basically get this thing up and running, to get them to approve it, to get the ground rules set. There were so many ground rules. It was like, Steve doesn't want to talk to you. Okay, he will talk to you, but he won't talk to you about X. He won't talk to you about future products. He doesn't want to talk about the past. It's like, okay, that's we're left with the present.
How was your breakfast today, Steve?
It was a very short, very difficult, one of the most difficult interviews that I've ever done. And he didn't want to be there. And it was very clear he didn't.
You could tell.
A bunch of short answers. But here's the thing. At the very end of it, this is when he was the ICEO. At the very end of it, I said, Steve, You're the interim CEO. Do you have any thoughts about whether you'd like to stay on in this permanently, whether you'd like to do something else and step away? What do you think about your status as like the future of you as a CEO? Not about future products at all, right? And there's a long pause, and then he basically gave me this kind of like philosophical, almost like 60s hippies answer, which is, we're all of us are just renting time here on planet Earth, and you never know how long you're going to be here. And I'm just doing it day to day, right? Hangs up. 5 minutes later, Katie Cotton calls.
Oh God!
And she was on the call because she was the please hold for Steve Jobs person. 5 minutes later, Katie Cotton calls me and she says, "You got to take that last question out." and it was not a question. It was like you can't have that last response in there. And we cut it because it was so like, this is not a negotiation, and honestly, we were under so many limited terms at that point. It wasn't going to be a gotcha, obviously something, but afterward, I was like, what was that? Like, why? And it was like a decade later in reporting about Steve Jobs's cancer story that the timing came out. My interview with him was a few weeks after he had been initially diagnosed with pancreatic cancer.
Right.
And it was not well known. And the last thing they wanted is Steve Jobs being philosophical about life and death in print somewhere.
Oh,
and
my goodness.
And it was like 10 years later, I was like, oh, Katie, I understand now. I understand why you were freaking out about him giving some sort of hippy-dippy response about life and death, because she knew what was actually going on. So that was her job. It was protecting the company and protecting Steve Jobs.
Mm-hmm. And I will say that on the other side of it, for a lot of companies that I've worked with, being unpredictable is usually the thing that they like the least. Like them not liking your product, they're like, oh, we're putting that person in. They're going to be the foil. They do the thing that everything else. You throwing them like that was, I wouldn't even consider what Jason did as a zinger. That's just a normal conversation. Yeah. But the press that does throw zingers are the ones that are like, yeah, we're not going to talk to them.
Yeah, with no predictability.
They can't calculate. They're like, we can't calculate what's going to happen next, and they just go, yeah, we're going to put them over there. And a lot of times they get invited to things, and then they just don't actually talk to any of the executives. There's a lot of. I think that a lot of times with all things, people think that everything is cut and dry and everyone has access or doesn't have access, but there's a large gradient of access that companies use to tighten and loosen things. And if you pay attention to them, especially if you've been in the conversations, you start paying attention to those flows a lot, and understanding where they all go.
Oh yeah, no, there was a moment where there was an Apple event at Town Hall. And the format of that used to be like there'd be the event, and then there'd be a little bit before they could actually open up the demo area, so that like actually before and just after, everybody's milling about like in the lobby or whatever. And so I was talking to a friend of mine that I'd known for about 15 years. And we've been talking for about 10 or 15 minutes, and then Tim Cook is like wanders over and starts and enters the conversation, and Tim Cook has entered the chat, and I don't have any sort of relationship with him. There was a good relationship between the two, so mostly it was Tim Cook wasn't like Steve Jobs. He wasn't obnoxious. It was like, I'm not going to pretend that like this third person isn't here. I mean, I don't have a lot to say to him, but I actually wanted to say hello to this other person, but I'm not going to. Again, there's a story about me and Steve Jobs and someone else, but I'm not going to tell here. But then what happened? So I'm like, okay, I'm not going to like start peppering Tim Cooks with questions at a moment that's designed to be no, this isn't like a question and answer session. But nonetheless, like I just feel this like on my back shoulder, and a very, very nervous looking Apple PR person was like, "Hey, Andy, they've just opened the demo area. You want to come into the demo area?" And it was like clearly that Tim Cook is talking. Why is Tim Cook is not supposed to be talking to Andy? Get Andy out of there. Abort.
Well, look over there, a butterfly. Yeah.
Or shouldn't stand in that case.
There's the other thing you pay attention to after a while. If you've ever watched Braveheart, there's a moment where I'm going to do a spoiler, but it's 30 years old. There's a point where he comes down and he walks into the square, and you see one of the Scottish lords or whatever look out someone, and he kind of raises his eyebrows like this, and then William Wallace gets captured. You see a lot of that at press events. like, an executive will look over at their, at their PR person and go, did you see their eyebrow go up, and suddenly a whole bunch of things happen and that person is now somewhere else, and so it's something that is anyway. So, and she was, I will say that the interactions that I had, she was the master of that kind of thing. Like, she just really understood, and she was she kind of came up from, there's still a whole group of people that were really at Apple during the hard times, and it is their DNA. Like the 1996 to 1999 is a space that anybody that's still at Apple, they think and talk about that all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's just that no matter how big they get, it's that whole like being there in the 30s. For people who save everything. It doesn't matter how big Apple gets, they just worry about. I think that they worry a lot still about this all could end tomorrow. So,
well, I think that is a good time for us to take a quick break, so we can let that be the first segment of the show. Again, Katie Cotton passed away on April 6th of this year.
Too young.
Yeah.
Too young. She was in her 50s. Way too young.
Yeah. All right, let's take a quick break and then we'll come back with loads more because we've got a lot to talk about here on MacBreak Weekly. Of course, joining me in studio for this episode is Rosemary Orchard. Thank you for being here.
Hi, thanks for having me. It's great fun.
We've also got Jason Snell, Alex Lindsay, and Andy Ihnatko, your typical cast of characters. Leo Laporte is out.
The usual.
But he will be back soon. But let me tell you about ZocDoc, who are bringing you this episode of MacBreak Weekly. When someone is just exceptionally good at what they do, perhaps a waiter, a chef, a doctor, a podcaster, then you're in good hands. It's like seeing a chef running a kitchen so well that Gordon Ramsay couldn't even complain. You're confident in them. When you find the right doctor, you can feel it. You feel heard. You feel at ease. I was just talking about the doctor I had when I lived in Missouri and how I would drive practically across the state to go and see her because of how incredible she was. And no matter where I lived in Missouri, I would always come back to her because she really did make me feel heard, made me feel at ease. And on ZocDoc, it can help you find the doctor that's right for you. The process is seamless. The quality care you need is just a few taps away in the ZocDoc app. ZocDoc is the only free app that lets you find and book doctors who are patient reviewed. You can find whether they take your insurance and are available when you need them and treat almost every condition under the sun, all available in the app. No more doctor roulette or scouring the internet for questionable reviews. With ZocDoc, you have a trusted guide to connect you to your favorite doctor, the one you haven't met yet. Book an appointment with a few taps in ZocDoc's app and start feeling better faster with ZocDoc. Go to ZocDoc.com/MacBreak and download the ZocDoc app for free. Then find and book a top-rated doctor today. Many are available within 24 hours. That's ZocDoc.com/MacBreak. ZocDoc.com/MacBreak. I know you can probably remember and go to ZocDoc.com or do a search for ZocDoc. I really, really, really ask you to please go to ZocDoc.com/MacBreak specifically. So that way they know that you came from this show. And it's well worth checking out the ZocDoc app. All right, back from the break, and it's time for some more MacBreak Weekly. The first thing I wanted to talk about, there's a new report from Bloomberg, from Mark Gurman over at Bloomberg, came out on April 9th. And one of the things that's been talked about is how Apple appears to be continuing its efforts to discourage unionization. Even the phrasing is difficult here because of the way that these companies try to avoid doing what's against the law while still coming very close to doing what's against the law. According to Bloomberg's Mark Gurman, over the past 2 weeks, quote, managers at Apple's roughly 270 U.S. retail outlets held meetings with staff members to discuss the risks of unionization and provide a planned update on bargaining between the company and the first unionized store, which is in Maryland. Andy Ihnatko, I'm kicking things off with you.
Yeah, this is Apple's on very dangerous ground, and they're not unique about this in tech. There is a there seems to be a moment here for labor in technology to unionize in a way that 10 years ago might have thought to be, well, why on earth would, gosh, we're so lucky to be working for Apple. We're so lucky to be working for Microsoft. Google is our dream jobs. Why would we need a union? And with the past 10 years, yeah, here's all the reasons why you want to have a union. And as usual, it's the lowest paid, most put upon employees, like Apple retail employees, that are at the sort of the forefront of this, because these are the people that are like, you know what, we really we want to hand inspect everything that our retail employees have on them before we let them leave the store at the end of their shift. But we're going to make them punch out before they do that, and basically keep them at their workplace for another 20 minutes to a half an hour while they wait for, and like, no, you have to pay them if that's a requirement of their job, you have to pay them for that. And other things like that have caused a couple hundred Apple stores to really seriously discuss whether or not they want to unionize. And there's, as soon as the technology companies, they're not like hiring Pinkerton men to shoot into crowds anymore, but nonetheless, the motive, and let's not forget that actually used to happen, like in the early part of the 20th century, that it would be, hey, you're having a strike in front of it. Well, guess what? We're not going to simply like have meetings, have meetings during lunch hours and put things up in your break room. We are going to hire gangs of thugs to beat you up and or shoot you. To basically encourage you to not try to unionize against the benevolent owners of your company, who, for God's sakes, they put a public library in your town. What else do you want? And so it gets really difficult, because Apple certainly wants to make that not happen, because it's inconvenient, as always, to have to have a workforce that is empowered to affect the company's ability to do business. That's a bad thing in the eyes of a corporation. It certainly is. They're certainly entitled to put together their side of, here's why we think that we can do better for you by negotiating with you directly instead of through a union. But nonetheless, they've also gotten into trouble by ignoring labor laws about employees feeling as though these are mandatory meetings in which we're forced to hear Apple's pitch about why they shouldn't unionize. And Apple does not have the excuse of, oh, well, geez, they can't do the Costanza defense. Like, oh, gosh, was that against American labor laws? We just thought that we were friendly buying them lunch at Panera and just having a talk friend to friend about this. Like, again, this is another one of those times where I have to haul out that phrase that a lot of people don't like. They're a $2 trillion company. They know better than this. And so they can't pretend that they don't know that this is intimidating tactics in the eyes of national labor laws. So, yeah, I think it's important for labor to have this ability, to have this power. And I think it's very, very important for Apple to allow their employees to have these conversations amongst themselves and not interfere. If they do, then they become a very ordinary company, and we have no and the next time Tim Cook talks about wanting to change the world and being human focused, there's a reason for like members of the press at Apple Park to go and hope that the mics pick it up.
You say they know better than to do this, and they're doing it. What is the message there? If they are very clearly doing the thing that they know better than to be doing, is it that the company just feels powerful enough to make this? Is it that they're, as far as your take on it, obviously we don't know exactly why. Yeah. Is it that because other companies are doing it, then we feel this is right within the bounds of what's allowed? Is it just a thing that every company who hears the sound of unionization screaming down the halls does? I mean, why do we think that a $2 trillion company that knows better is still making this choice?
Because it is so important from their point of view. Again, the ability to simply make an employment policy based on their own whims and not have to really factor in, well, how do the employees feel about this, without having to make the decision beyond how many of is this unfair enough that we won't be able to hire people anymore or retain people anymore? And if the answer is no, well, great. Guess what? You're going to be unpaid for a half an hour while we wait for someone to search your bags. Collective bargaining is a really, really powerful tool, and big companies are so encouraged to self-motivated to make that not happen, that not only are they willing to sort of bend laws or try to see if they can get away with bending laws, but there are entire huge industries of lawyers and consultants that once the sabers start getting rattled, you hire this sort of disaster company that will help you to put down a unionization moment. They are specialists in this sort of thing. So as soon as you see a company start to retain that kind of representation, you know that they're gloving up for what they hope won't be a bloody battle, but they're going to fight and try to make sure that they get to keep the status quo because they created the status quo.
Any other thoughts on Apple's choice here to sort of attempt to inform people of why unionization might not be a good thing for them?
Right. The phrase, Mikah, you're searching for is to discuss the risks of unionization.
There we go.
It feels like a high school safe sex lecture, kind of like, look, we're not telling you not to have sex because we legally can't do that, but we can show you pictures of diseases, and you make up your own mind. No, fine. I mean, you do whatever you want, but look at the picture. I think it is. I mean, Andy said it. Your question about why. I feel like two parts of Apple's culture are happening here. One is they want to, it's their don't spend money if you don't have to. It's that Depression era ethos that Steve Jobs inculcated in the whole company when he came back and they almost went out of business. I think there is a let's not spend money. They don't think of it as we're a $2 billion company, right? They think of it as save every penny, even though they are, billions and billions of dollars in cash in the bank and all of that, right? Like, they just don't think that way. And the other thing is some combination of control and wanting to go their own way. I think that feeds into this too, which is we don't want to talk to a union. I'm not even sure if it's entirely motivated by we just want to be cheap and have control over our employees. I think it's partially that, but I think partially it's, don't make us negotiate with a union and have to like, we want to break rules and do things in a new way that is going to be great for everybody. Yeah. Right. Exactly. I mean, I think they would say not that it favors us. They'd say, it favors our customers. But, if you think about Apple sort of placing things as on that hierarchy of what's important to Apple, what's important to the customers, and then what's important to its developers, I think you could also put its retail employees down in that level of the hierarchy where they're much more concerned about their experience and the customer experience than they necessarily are with the employees in the retail stores. And I don't think they have an adversarial relationship with them, but I think that culturally you can see the switches in Apple's personality, corporate personality that would end up manifesting in a way like this, which is just, plus, I mean, they've got lawyers on their staff who are like, I got union busting 101 right here. Did I say union busting out loud? I meant encouraging employees not to form unions 101. I've got that book right here. We can use it.
Yeah. And the thing is that it is hard for companies when unions come in. I used to be part of a union, so I'm pretty familiar with it. And the challenge really is for the companies is that if you really want to, unions will restrict your ability to let people go. And what that becomes problematic for is that they end up with employees they can't let go, and they have to kind of move them around and they may not be, again, Apple's going to look at it like it may not be supporting their customer service because they have somebody that would be too complicated to not have them be there anymore. And so I think that's part of it. I think also, obviously it's going to make everything more expensive, so that they're doing it. And the problem with unions sometimes that companies look at is that once you're in a union contract, what does the union have to offer you? It's not the status quo. It is that every time there's a contract negotiation, you're going to get more, and so they're going to keep on ratcheting that up. So companies look at that trajectory and it's very easy for them to calculate that over this many years, it'll be worth not having that happen. So I think companies look at it from that perspective. It's also not, unions are really good for folks in the middle and at the bottom of the employee group. They're not usually good for the top performers at the that are brought into that union, because usually that their ability to perform and excel tends to be retarded by the union. Because you're not allowed to do a little extra. You're not allowed to do things like, for instance, if you're a union in any of these stores, a lot of people join. I know people that work at Apple Park, started at an Apple store. Go into a union, if you're unionized, you'll never work at Apple Park. And then so the thing is that Apple will never say that. And they may say the same thing, like, look over there. But everything's very subjective. And I'm not saying that this is the way it should be. I'm just saying that this is the way it is. A company will never take a union person and put them into the headquarters because they view unions as viruses. And so the thing is that so they're going to keep you sectioned off. If you work at a union store, you'll work at that union store. You'll never transfer to another store. You'll never transfer, there's a bunch of things. That's what they're trying to, when they say we're educating you on what it is and we can't tell you what the problems are, what they're insinuating is, this is the only store you'll ever work at. And so those are the kind of things that I think that we have a nuanced view of understanding why Apple does that. Whether they do it or not is going to be up to the employees in the end. I mean, they're going to vote on whether they do it. I think that the reason that we're having these conversations is because Apple has not been very good at taking care of their employees. Mm-hmm. So I think that's the underlying problem is exactly what Andy talked about. You have to stand there on your own time and get checked out. You have to do this. The best way for Apple, if they really want to not have unions, is to make sure that their employees are super excited about being there. And so the thing is that, so customer service for their employees is their number one way out of this. And the reason that there are stores that are unionized is because Apple wasn't paying enough attention to that one piece of the puzzle. So I think that Apple needs to pay a lot more attention to that as they move forward. And that's going to be the easiest way to do it other than the strong arming tactics that they've used so far.
In continuing with sort of this ongoing conversation, not necessarily this time about unionization, but sort of Apple as a company, I just saw a report from Reuters where now the German antitrust regulator is kind of taking a look at Apple. And luckily, I've got someone here who knows a thing or two about German, so you can pronounce the name of the regulator for us, Rosemary.
So it's the Bundeskartellamt, which is like more of a bureaucratic organization rather than a regulator specifically. It's an arm of the government, which has designated Apple a company of paramount significance for competition across markets, which basically means that Apple does things differently for their apps compared to what they're making app developers do, which is, for example, things like location tracking. You have to confirm it if you want to download an app like Glimpse, that's GLYMPSE, to share your location from your phone, but you don't have to do that with Find My. And the fact that this is different is a cause for concern, not just in Germany, in France as well, actually. Yeah,
it's starting to look like all across the globe, not companies, but in this case, governments and large regulating bodies are all lining up in their sort of perspective on Apple. And of course, Apple in response has said the cartel's office, because apparently they didn't want to pronounce that name either, designation misrepresents the fierce competition Apple faces in Germany, and it discounts the value of a business model that puts user privacy and security at its core. That was what Apple's spokesperson said in response to this new designation. Now, the designation alone obviously is simply that, a designation, but what it does mean is this moves Apple into a place where this governing body can start to shape how Apple practices or how Apple does things within Germany. And I think kind of the larger conversation here is how these small changes in specific countries start to lead to a bigger change overall. And it does make me wonder, Jason, as time has gone on and as we've started to see these subtle changes to the way that Apple runs the App Store, to the way that it is, making certain technologies available to developers, and as things are becoming at least a little bit more open, how do you see Apple responding over the coming years to these sort of large groups saying, hey, we're paying attention more than we have before, and we think that this and this and this could be anti-competitive or maybe at issue? And my second question, I guess, along with this is, why are we not necessarily seeing the same thing with some of the other competitors out there? For example, Google and its Android ecosystem.
Well, I think there's, to answer your second question first, I think there's enough about that happening too. Like, I think they're on different fronts, but I do think that big tech in general, capital B, capital T, is in the crosshairs of a lot of these organizations. And you'll see it in different ways in different places. And Apple and the App Store especially are a hot topic right now. So I love that the German government not only has a cartel bureau, but that they've called Apple a cartel. That's amazing. Cartel with a K because it's German. But again, we get the point. It's the same word. It's a cognate. About Apple's strategy here, I know a lot of us who follow Apple want that. It seems obvious for us that everybody's going to put the screws to Apple here and that Apple's going to need to change. And a lot of us have felt that the thing you do when it's obvious is you change and you say, all right, we're going to get ahead of this and we're going to head this off before we lose control of the situation. And thus far, that has not happened, not even a little bit. And I think that what we have to do is realize that's not the game that Apple is playing strategically, although there is a little bit of a serious risk that they get this ball starts rolling so fast that they can't stop it. I think Apple has shown that they're highly confident that if they fight for what they believe in every step of the way, and when they're legally forced to do something, they do it to the letter of the law and no further, they will actually end up better off in net than if they try to reach a settlement where they open things up based on like fear of worse punishment. That is not the game that they have played thus far. And I think we just need to admit that's not how they're going to play this game, that Apple thinks there are limited levers, especially in the US, but even overseas with something like the credit card transaction fees in the App Store, that you can tell us to let outside credit cards be charged, but you can't tell us that we can't charge for our developer tools, so we're just going to charge for access to our developer tools, right? Like that's the game that they've played, which is what can you make us do and what can you not? And if we fight you every step of the way, what we'll end up with is a very limited set of things in a very limited set of locations. I think it's risky, but I am not a lawyer who works at Apple who has analyzed all of this. And I'm sure they've spent a lot of money analyzing this and deciding that the best way for them to deal with this is just to fight it every step of the way and only do exactly what they're asked to do. And so I think that is going to continue. And I do think personally that they risk this getting out of hand and them losing more than they would have lost if they had tried to tidy things up in advance. I'd say the only example of them getting out in front of something in the last 5 years where it felt like they saw where it was going was handing the going from 30 to 15% with small developers, where they felt like that was being used against them and that they generated that program for small developers, and it sort of defanged that whole argument about like, look at this poor person who just it's just him and his wife and they're the marketing and developing for an app, and it's their entire livelihood, and you're taking money out of their hands. And Apple's like, okay, whoosh, all those people are now 15% instead of 30, and now it's all about game, in-app purchases and things like that. That's the one case where I think they saw where it was going and got out in front. But most of these regulatory cases, they're just like, nah, tell us, we'll fight it, and then we'll do whatever you tell us, and we'll make it not mean what you think it means, which I'm sure the regulators hate. But if the law isn't there, then they're going to keep doing it.
Yeah, and this is why I'm very, very much in favor of these regulators making as strong and as strong a case as they can, because Apple that was not that reduction in commissions to people who are not making cajillions of dollars on the App Store. That's not something that they were planning to do anyway. That was something they did as a result of pressure. So they basically made the App Store a much more profitable enterprise for a great many developers, and it was because of regulators honking down their snorkel. And so if the only way to get Apple to change the way that they run the App Store, if after years and years of complaints, is to make them forced to say, look, we want to be able to, we want to control our own destiny. That is the goal of every human being on this planet, and certainly the goal of every company that wants to continue to survive, to be able to control exactly what they do and not have to do anything that they feel they don't want to do. That's natural. But if they want to continue to have that ability and not have to deal with 18 different regulatory agencies every time they make a move, they are going to have to look at these things and saying, okay, what would it cost us if we allow developers to have a more direct access to their customers, to basically have a relationship with their customers in addition to a relationship with Apple? Would it cost us much? Not really. Okay, so let's give the developers this thing they want. And there's other examples there, but this is why I'm very much pro making Apple at least defend their actions to an organization that has some ability to change the way that they have to do things.
And I think that, as a pretty strong Apple user, most of the regulations that we're talking about are good for the large developers, very wealthy developers that are looking for this, not for the user. These aren't benefits to the user. As a user, I don't want to give you my contact information as a developer. As a developer, I figure out some other way around it. I give you an incentive to let me contact you. I'm about to release an app for retail. And so I think about it a lot, and I'm going to give you reasons to be in contact with me, but I don't care whether Apple gives me the contact information or not. As a user, I definitely don't want every person. It will depress the number of apps that I buy if people start emailing me based on the fact that I bought their apps. And that's what Apple, I think, looks at is the user experience. And for the location stuff, I absolutely want to be able to identify that. When I log into my phone at the very beginning, Apple says, can I use location services, inside of it? So it's not that they're not doing it. They're just doing it at a whole scale level of all the apps that they provide. So I think that, this is another example of regulators not totally understanding how things work, which is we expect at this point. But so I'm saying, yes, you can use my location service. If I say no, I can't use those. It won't work on any of those things when I'm installing the phone. When I add new apps like Glimpse or other things like that, I want to be asked, how often can this app give me location? And if they want to do it where I think Apple's easier way to handle this is just to put it back into their apps, because 90% of the Apple users would just say yes to the location services for their tracking stuff. They would just go, sure, Apple can do it. No, Tile can't, because I don't want my data sold, And so the thing is that these companies, again, the restrictions really, what the companies are bristling about is not the fact that their little app won't work. It's that they want to take your location data, they want to package it up and sell it to somebody. And that's the thing that's what they're complaining about, is the fact that that Tile can't take your data, wrap it up into a nice little thing and sell you like a pig, And so the thing is that's what we should be allowed to say, no, we don't want to be packaged up as meat and sold to other companies as our data. And so I think that is the thing that as a user, I think we have the right to have Apple be able to do those things. And what's happening is all these big companies are talking to all the regulators, trying to say, well, this is all Apple doing this thing, but they're taking away our rights as users to have our privacy, and we want to have that privacy. And so I think that Apple's going to keep on dragging this out, because as a user, I want Apple to fight this tooth and nail all the way to the end. And in the end, I want it to be ashes in their mouth, for us, not Apple, but for all the other companies, that you can keep on fighting on this. And by the time, and I don't think that Apple's not doing anything. I think Apple is figuring out how the developer contracts work, how the benefits work, how all those other things work. Based on it, they're just buying time, and as a user, I want them to buy time. I don't want to give these companies anything. So I think that's the problem is that I think if you're thinking about it from the user perspective, Apple is defending our ability to not be tracked, not be, sold. So,
do you think that Apple is solely concerned about that, or does Apple have its own interest in mind as well? Because it sounds like it's almost an argument that Apple is a crusader for people's privacy. It's Apple's interest to give us our privacy. That's what we're buying into. We are stakeholders as users. We are stakeholders. We are paying and buying Apple products partially because we want this. And so we're paying into that. So it's absolutely an Apple. Apple is acting out of its own benefit. And that own benefit is that the users that buy their products want those services, and so Apple makes more money by giving them what they want, which is that being the arbitrator and saying that
a lot of things can't go out is part of why simplicity is part of why I'm an Apple user, but also privacy and safety and all those other things that I want as a user. I am buying Apple products, and I get more as these conversations happen. I become more hardened as an Apple user because I want those things to stay there, and I have less and less interest in every other platform as an Apple user. And again, Apple is acting out of its own best interest, and that own best interest is serving the users with things that they want.
I do want to say, hold on just a sec, because I've seen out of the corner of my eye, Rosemary's been doing a lot of research over here. And so I want to give her a chance to tell us what she's come up with.
Well, what I was going to say is I think it also makes a lot of sense for Apple to bide their time on this, because currently they have the German, it's the Federal Office for the Cartels and Syndicates, or syndicates, depending on how you translate it. But they've also got the French regulatory body on them. And the UK also has a competition authority who will definitely be interested in this sort of thing as well. And so by waiting, they're also just being sensible with development costs, because if they start implementing something based on the way that they think the German authorities are going to go, and then the French authorities want something that's more complex or different, then of course they're going to have to take a couple of steps back, undo what they've already done, maybe throw everything away and start over. So by waiting, they're actually doing the sensible thing. And it's not like the Apple apps aren't listed. If you go into the settings on your phone, into the location services, I can go in and turn off Find My. But if I deny location services at a fundamental iOS level, then I won't get things like location-based reminders. And I have seen people turn this off. And the number of people I have seen turn off location services, and then they're like, why does this thing not work anymore? It's because it's using your location, and your location isn't just GPS location, it's also Bluetooth and things like that. So it's really complicated, and things like emergency SOS built into your phone, like the satellite calls, but also just emergency calls. Apple actually provides that location of your device when you're calling the emergency services. And they can do that because they've actually, talked to the emergency services in lots of countries to integrate stuff. And I'm personally, I'm very much with Alex here. I want Apple to wait so that they can do the right thing as far as the user is concerned. But I do get it from the regulator's point. I think it's just one of those things where they're like, oh yes, but we would like a backdoor so that we can see what the messages are. It's no, there's no such thing as an exclusive backdoor. You don't have a fundamental understanding of technology. And I wish that we would have more people who actually understand not just how technology works, but also why systems are set up the way they are, and would consult with various companies and then independent consultants as well who don't work for Apple or Google or Facebook or Twitter or whoever it is, to give them guidance here. It reminds me of the case of Google versus Oracle with Java, where the judge actually went and learned how to develop and write programs and so on, so that he could actually make a proper judgment on whether or not this was whether they were actually copying things or whether they weren't. But it seems like a lot of government agencies understandably don't have the time for that, but they if they're going to regulate on tech, they need to understand tech, and a lot of them don't. They're scared of it.
Yeah, Andy, I have to ask you, because it tends to be during these conversations, you do come down on the side of, encouragement of regulation. But the argument in response to that typically does end up, especially in the United States, being, well, and please forgive me, those of you who are up in age, but the sort of argument is, all those old folks don't know anything about technology, and if they touch it, they're going to ruin everything because they don't get the What is your argument in response to that? How can, and I'm not asking this from my own perspective, but just from the perspective of folks who are tuning in and are asking, how do you still have that hope in your heart, and that makes you feel, oh, I do want this regulation to still take place, if there seems to be a lot of argument that there's no faith in these folks being able to properly regulate it? And maybe another great question would be, when is, give us an example, I can think of a few, when regulation in terms of tech specifically has been a net positive for folks, even though it's coming from these older folks who may or may not know how technology works.
I very appreciate the way that you framed that question, because I think that oftentimes this is a question of philosophy. it was very important in the 90s as the internet was getting launched and as these tech companies started having the power to not just be companies that try to sell 1 million computers and then they become obsolete and then they're competing with their competitors' next round of computing hardware. When it really became their ability to basically amass an incredible amount of power, not only as any business can, but also power over individuals' lives. It was at that point, it was very, very important to have sort of a hands-off attitude. The Clinton administration was very, very. It was not laissez-faire. It was not ignorance. It was they were supporting literally the argument that we can't regulate a problem that we think is going to happen in the hopes that we are averting a disaster, because we have to let creativity flow. We have to let inventors create things. And without that kind of attitude in the 90s, without that hands-off regulatory attitude, we would not have so many of the benefits that we have right now. Now, I feel as though we've let that go so far at this point that now oftentimes we feel as though regulating tech companies is in itself anathema. I feel as though right now they are organizations are in positions of incredible power, again, over individual lives now. And there needs to be an opposing force to that power. We can't have even a company like Apple, who I very much have a positive attitude towards, say that we know what's best for everybody and we're going to do what we want to do. And if you order us to do something, we're just not going to do it, or we're going to do it in such a half-assed way that, it's that we're going to be laughing at you. We are wholly and untouchable. We get to do exactly what we want to do. And because they're a business, it's always going to amount to what's best for our company, what's best for our shareholders and stakeholders. There needs to be a balancing force against that. Now, I don't necessarily think that I'm not necessarily pro regulation. Mm-hmm. I'm very much pro a government agency that has the ability to put the hurt on a company like Apple or Microsoft or Google or TikTok to say, you're going to have to explain this policy. You're going to have to defend this policy to us. And if you don't come up with a really good explanation for why you run your business this way, why Google, you are basically not supporting any ad network technology that makes it harder for you to game the system. Meaning, you're not going to support in the world's most popular web browser that you create a technology that would affect your ad network. You're going to have to explain to us, under the possible penalty of us telling you, no, you can't do that anymore if you don't come up with a really good argument for it. That sort of stuff is really, really important. Otherwise, again, the entire world is a case of people in a power structure imposing their will on people who do not have power, and that's why I think that's really a very important thing. I would say that there was a time when the stock market was unregulated, and we know what happened then. So basically said, okay, well, you know what? You can't just simply make trades based on information that's not public yet, because that's how you wind up with 81 billionaires and everybody else living on the streets. You can't do that anymore. In terms of technology, I'm a little bit on the spot, and I can't think of a specific example, but I'm sure if you give me an hour.
GDPR, right?
I can help. I can.
GDPR. It's a good. I'm sorry. Go
yeah, please, Alex.
All I was gonna say is that the breakup of AT&T was good because it had well over 90% of the market. The limiting of Microsoft was good because it had over 90% of the market. So when a company has more than 90% of the market, I think that these regulations start to make sense. Even if they're not perfect, they're better than the alternative. When a company has 50% of the market, and it doesn't have and there's still market pressures that can affect it, because Apple is not in a vacuum. Apple still has Android out there that is being used, and 50% of the world, or more than 50% of the world, still uses Android. I think we do need to step a little lighter, given the fact that most elected officials, and I can say this with an enormous amount of experience, are digital children. They barely know how to use email. And so, and I'm not saying that from something I read, so the vast majority of them are, barely understand how their computer works, and so them making decisions, or those decisions being made by people who have never been in the industry, they're not digital children, they're just children. Then between those two, I'd rather allow the market to make some decisions on that. And I think that, again, what I'm mostly focused on is that we pay attention to the average individual using the product, not big, rich companies that want to make more money, which is what most of these arguments are driven by, are companies that are making well more than $1 million a year on what they're doing and want to make sure. But that's where all of this is being driven, is competition of large companies, not paying attention to the individual user and their experience of the apparatuses. And I think we have to pay attention to those users. And I think we have to be very wary of, again, people who don't know email very well. It was great that someone learned how to program Java. I think that most people, at least in the United States that ever represent us, don't even know what Java is. So the thing is that other than coffee, and so if we watched the TikTok thing a little while, and that became clearer. So not it didn't make me feel better about what our representatives can do. And I think that it's fine. That's not their job. They should just stay, they should just be careful. It's not that they should never put something in when something's obvious, like, again, 90% of a market. That's one thing. But Apple is still less than half.
Yeah.
So.
And I think a good example of where things did actually work out well is COVID-19 contact tracing, where Apple and Google actually worked together in advance with regulators and were like, this is what we're going to do. We're going to make it so that it works everywhere, works the same way. There's going to be an API where developers can hook into that, so each government could implement their own thing, or states over here in the US could do their own thing, and so on and so forth. The one disadvantage of competition committees and so on is there was a case in the UK a while ago where a ferry service, I think it was P&O bought a route, and the competition committee deemed that they weren't allowed to run it because it would have just been them running on that route. I think they took over another company or something, and so then the previous two companies who would have been running it became one company, and they were told, no, you're not allowed to do that, and that ferry service disappeared. Like it stopped running, and that's where things get tricky. But I don't think we're likely to see that with tech at the moment. It's a shame Windows Phone didn't make it. Then there would have been 3. Even if it only had like 5%, that's still an option as a third thing for people who don't like Android or Apple. But at the moment, it's kind of a choice between Android or Apple, or maybe a dumb phone if you can find one somewhere. I think the Nokia 3310 probably still works. Just need to find a charging cable.
And I will say, Section 230, I don't think was written. They didn't know what it would do when they wrote it, but it has been a very effective form of regulation that has allowed everything that we have. I just want to make sure we outline that everything that we have in the internet right now, we can decide whether it's good or bad or whatever. But nothing would have happened without that. Without Section 230.
It's always interesting to look at the line between a regulation that protects rights and gives people opportunities, as opposed to regulation that says, no, you can't do that. So that's a good example of the first version of that.
All right, folks, it is time for us to take a quick break here on MacBreak Weekly before we come back with lots more stories about Apple and the surrounding news. I do want to tell you, I believe a new sponsor here on MacBreak Weekly, although you may have heard about them recently. But this episode of MacBreak Weekly is brought to you by Delete Me. And I'm not asking you to do that. It is the name of the sponsor. Have you ever searched for your name online, and when you did so, you weren't too pleased about how much of your personal information was available? Did it make you feel exposed or unsafe? Well, since 2010, Delete Me has been on a mission to empower individuals and organizations by allowing them to reclaim their privacy and help them remove personal data from online sources. Delete Me's team is driven by a passion for privacy and a commitment to making it simple for customers to use. So Delete Me helps reduce the risk of identity theft, credit card fraud, robocalls, spam, cybersecurity threats, harassment, and unwanted communications overall. Delete Me is the most trusted privacy solution available, as it helps thousands of customers remove their personal information online. And here's some stats. The average person has more than 2,000 pieces of data about them online that Delete Me can actually find and remove. So that's quite a bit of time you can end up saving if you aren't going and making those deletion requests manually. Delete Me has removed more than 50 million pieces of data for their customers. And if you're curious kind of what people have said in the past, one customer said, I signed up and they took it from there. Awesome service, already seeing results. Delete Me has actually sponsored a podcast of mine in the past, the Clockwise podcast. And I helped a family member, because I'm online and I want to be online and I want people to be able to find me. But my family member, very privacy minded, obviously didn't want all of his information all over the internet. And so Delete Me gave me, an account to use or a code so I could create my own little account, and had my family member's information, typed all of that in. And they went out and went to all of these sort of online data brokers that have names and addresses that have popped up through different means, and aliases and emails. I mean, all of these sites that are just there sort of hoovering up data. Many of them, they will, if you go and request it, have that data taken down. So what Delete Me does is it knows about all those places, and some that you may not even know about. And it goes and does all of that for you. And now when I type in that person's information, I can't find anything about them anymore. And they were very happy and pleased that that was the case. So here is how Delete Me works. First, you sign up and submit some basic information for removal from search engines by going to joindeleteme.com/twit. You go there, you type in that information because they need to know about you in order to find you online and be able to get it removed. Delete Me experts will find and remove your personal information from more than 580 data brokers, helping reduce your online footprint and keeping you and your family safe. Once the removal process starts, you will actually receive a detailed Delete Me report within 7 days. And it doesn't stop there. Delete Me will continue to scan and remove your personal information every 3 months. And with automated removal opt-out monitoring, they will ensure records don't get repopulated after they've been removed. So names, addresses, photos, emails, relatives, phone numbers, social media, property values, all sorts of stuff that these online data brokers make available. Delete Me goes and says, no thanks. And then they continue to say, no thanks. Keep that data off. As the data broker industry expands, contracts, and morphs, Delete Me continues to add new sites and features to ensure their service is both simple to use and effective in removing personally identifiable information. And since privacy exposures and incidents affect individuals differently, they even have privacy advisors that ensure that all of the customers have the support they need when they need it. It is great. And honestly, it's kind of fun because you just suddenly feel like you're getting one over on all those companies that have been getting one over on you this whole time. So protect yourself, reclaim your privacy. Go to joindeleteme.com/twit and use the code TWIT. That's joindeleteme.com/twit and code TWIT for 20% off. Thank you, Delete Me, for sponsoring this week's episode of MacBreak Weekly. All right, we are back from the break, and I want to start by talking about an Easter egg that was making the rounds for some reason, and actually has appeared in the past as well. I saw this report about macOS featuring the Bitcoin whitepaper. Was that from Satoshi Nakamoto? And this kind of ideas like this come up from time to time. Every once in a while, you'll see, oh, did you notice that this icon on Windows 11 actually has text that says this or that? Somebody was using the built-in tool dealing with sort of printers and print management, and it's a virtual scanner, actually. And they came across a document that was a PDF within the actual utility, the virtual scanner utility. And it happened to be the Bitcoin white paper. Well, then it resulted in multiple sites going, why is the Bitcoin white paper hidden in macOS? What does this mean? And then there have been multiple sites that are going, well, here's why it's there. Here's what I heard from a friend who heard from a friend who heard that it came out this way. And ultimately, I think what we all learned is that it doesn't really matter and it's just something silly. Jason, is that a fair take?
Yeah, I mean, so Andy Baio at waxy.org is the one who sort of popularized this, and then it spread around. And because you may not read Andy Baio's work, but all the bloggers you read Andy Baio. That's right. That's how that goes with Andy. And it is in there, and there's a lot of weird stuff in there. Honestly, there's images in there. If you look in the system library, which is now locked, which is so you know that it's something that came from Apple, you'll find lots of weird stuff. Nobody knows for sure. My guess is somebody needed a lightweight, unencumbered PDF to use for a preview or something, or for testing, and then it just stayed in there. And now that the jig is up, it'll go away. But it's kind of an Easter egg. A lot of people who, hate Bitcoin mining and all that, which, hey, I'm right there with you, are like angry about this. It's like, the initial white paper is kind of a brilliant piece of work. Mm-hmm. It's just that what has come from it has been what has come from it. But that initial white paper is sort of legendary in being this kind of mind bomb of like, whoa, I had no idea. And it's also like 160K or something. It's like a really lightweight PDF. So they stuck it in there. And rumor has it that the person who stuck it in there has had an open ticket inside Apple to remove it for a while and has just never done it. But my guess is the next major OS revision it'll be gone.
Now that it's really out there. I'm curious, do any of you remember another one of these? Because I don't even think this is directly an Easter egg so much as just... in this case, it just does kind of feel like testing. It's not so much of a, hey, here's a funny haha that's hiding inside of this. Does anyone remember any delightful Easter eggs or other situations
Star Wars
like this?
in the terminal springs to mind. Because there was, I'm not sure if it's still there, but for a while you could watch Star Wars like as an ASCII film in the terminal, which was really cool. That was definitely a good one.
There's a recent one. There's a new version of Overcast that came out in the Apple Watch version. In order to stay in the foreground while it's downloading your podcast to your Apple Watch, you have to actually qualify, like you have to be doing something else. And so Marco Arment built there's a breakout game inside of the Overcast Apple Watch that you can play while you download. And the whole point is it's like how, Panic's Prompt, which is a terminal app on iOS, ask for your location information, and they log it, and it's like, this is a feature where we tell you where you were when you logged into your server, but the real reason they do it is that it keeps the session up longer.
Oh, that's right.
So it doesn't disconnect. So there are a lot of Easter eggs that I would put in the category of Easter egg that's actually getting around some technical or Apple limitation. I kind of love those. And then maybe we can put a link in the show notes. James Thompson, or you can just Google James Thompson Easter eggs. Our friend who's the PCalc developer, he gave a whole presentation about the history of Apple Easter eggs, including ones. He's the master at it. The About box in his app PCalc is literally a whole video game.
I mean, he literally had to make it into a separate app. That's available on the App Store because there were so many Easter eggs that it was larger than the actual calculator. And
it was bigger than the calculator. Yes. Yeah, it's brilliant. Absolutely true. So James is obsessed with this, and he has a great YouTube video of his presentation that I highly recommend.
The king of these kind of Easter eggs, and we can talk about this even though it's not a Mac thing because it makes Microsoft look stupid. Like there was a tiny little Easter egg hidden inside Excel that was, hey, wouldn't it be funny if we put like a tiny like lightweight version of Microsoft Flight Simulator so that, hey, haha, while the boss isn't looking, you can play Flight Simulator. And unbeknownst to like the project managers, with each iteration of Excel, they kept making it better and better and better until it was an enormous resource hog. And they had to say, why is so much memory and storage being allocated to a secret flight simulator inside Excel?
That's literally what happened with James too. It's the same thing, which is like, what if I do a second level? It's like, no, don't. Oh no, he did it. He did a second level.
I mean, he did at least make a separate app for rolling dice. So, that could have been bundled into the About section. But hey, who needs actual flaming bananas when you can throw virtual ones?
Yeah, we had an old office hours. Steve Wright was on, and he actually is the person who coined the name Easter egg.
Oh, wow.
And so he was defending programmers at Atari for having, it was like a castle inside of a castle inside of a castle that had these, I think their names written in it or something like that. And he had talking to a very angry executive at Atari about it, about why resources were being used to write something that, that wasn't there. And he's like, it's for fun. It's like your search. It literally just kind of came out like the way he describes it. It was like, you're searching around for something and that it might be there, but you don't know where. It's like an Easter egg. And
isn't that I feel like the definitive early computing Easter egg was in the adventure game where you could get the invisible key on the Atari 2600 and go into the room where it said created by Warren Robinette.
Yeah,
I still remember his name.
Wow.
It's like a castle inside of a castle inside of a castle.
Yeah,
and you had the key. And that was the original Easter egg. And
it was an empty room except for the credits. And so many of those are the credits. Like the Mac Finder, original Mac Finder and early Mac Finders, if you held down Option or Command and Option and chose about the Finder, you would get like a picture of mountains and it would actually list the names of the people on the Finder team. Yeah. And there were a lot of those things. By the way, speaking of Steve Jobs, who we mentioned earlier, he came back to Apple and was like, take everybody's name out of everything. No more Easter eggs. What a killjoy that guy was. But there are still some Easter eggs. And like they put the text of the Think Different ad is on the the text edit icon now, or text edit document icon.
Yes.
Like there are still places that you can find little hidden bits of whimsy inside macOS, and definitely in various apps too.
And everyone tries to add them. When you're working on something, it's kind of they found that there was like things added to hieroglyphics. Like the people just went, the scribes were there were like, we really think the Pharaoh isn't very smart. There's like these little things off in the corner, but so, we've been adding, when you're working on it, I know in Star Wars, that was always the thing that we were trying to do is figure out where there's a shot where I'm holding Mentos in the Queen ship, that you don't see, it goes back fast enough that I'm still pretty motion blurred, but you try to add, things into it and try not to get caught.
All righty. Moving along, I sometimes hesitate with these stories, but I am curious people's takes on, as we continue to see these phones sort of, as they try to update them and add new features and make it fresh and make it more interesting, you start to get to a point where you go, what else can you really do? So there are some kind of rumors that we have regarding the next iPhone, which of course tends to be announced sometime in September, including, and I'm just going to go through these and then we can kind of talk as a whole about what we think we could see on the next model and what that means in terms of what updates are likely to happen and whether that's going to be enough for folks to be happy, because sometimes they are and sometimes they aren't. Firstly, a titanium frame is rumored to be part of the Pro model for the next iPhone. The cameras are supposed to be getting an even thicker camera bump as we continue to see improvements to the camera quality and the camera lens quality, and maybe even a periscope lens that it's sort of built. It's not a periscope in the traditional sense, but they can sort of fit more lens technology within by using a periscope idea. And then having USB-C on iPhone 15 models, getting rid of the volume and mute buttons that are physical, and instead switching to solid state buttons that have haptic technology. So you would sort of feel them pressing up, down, and with a mute switch. I don't know how they'll do that, if they'll just do a button instead. As well as smaller bezels, perhaps the smallest bezels on a smartphone, at least as things stand. And I think we'll end there because things about color are not as important. So yeah, smaller bezels, better camera, titanium frame. It's sounding a lot like what we're used to. The big thing I feel is if we are getting rid of buttons, and what does that mean for my ability to volume up, volume down, hold the side button, restart anytime one of my family members has an issue with their phone. Oh, is it going to get harder to troubleshoot these devices?
I mean, I recently had an issue with my iPad where it seemingly would not power on. It ran out of battery. It just wasn't working. And so I tried doing the press and hold of the volume button and the power button. And I forgot that there's also the up, down, left, right Konami code style thing. And so I went to the Apple store and, I made an appointment, walked in and everything. And like the person who was checking me in was like, oh, have you tried doing the complicated thing? And then it suddenly started working. And I was like, I forgot that was a thing. So maybe if they could make that a bit easier, but I don't necessarily want extra buttons. The thing that I always hear people asking about is like the mute switch. They want to be able to turn this on and off digitally, but because there's a physical button on the iPhone, you can't turn it on and off using shortcuts. And so, like maybe losing that button would be a good thing. Maybe not. I don't know. Like I liked it when I had it on the iPad, but I changed it to rotation lock really quickly as soon as that feature came out. So I don't know, like losing buttons, better buttons. I don't know.
I was
just going to say, I like the little fidgety options that are there, but go ahead, Andy.
I was just going to say that that's the only part of these rumors that really kind of worries me, because if it's haptic, but there's still protruding touch points that you can find by feel, I would be less worried about it. If it were just that, hey, we silk screened a pattern to show you, to help you find where the up, down, and mute buttons are, that would be to me a really big step back. Because even on my iPad, for instance, I can't find the volume buttons unless I'm feeling for them at the top of the screen. Mm-hmm. And that's, I know that's maybe there's a different sort of case study, because with the iPad, you really often are using it in different orientations depending on how productive you're being or what you're sort of doing with it. But believe me, if I were like in the middle of a concert or something, and I forgot to mute my phone, and my phone starts an alarm, and I suddenly have to, in the dark, keep just desperately just like squeezing edges of my phone, hoping that I find the haptic switch in there, that would be a really big step back for me. As always, this is the same argument that I had when Apple deleted the headphone jack. If they're making a change, they have to make sure that they're making it. To me, they're making a change that's customer forward. If it's just as simple as, we figured out that we can shave 80 cents off per unit if we switched installing manual clicky buttons with installing this haptic component. Hey, then we're going to go ahead with that. We don't really care, and people will just have to get used to it, or just we don't think that people are going to not buy an iPhone because we changed the clicky button into a haptic. That's super bad. If they can make the case that this makes it, the clicky button is another place for liquid to ingress. It's another thing that can break. Like if you drop it, these things can get jammed, and that's why you have to now do like $130 service on this phone, whereas the haptic module will be have greater integrity. Then I could get behind it. But again, it would be so easy to make sure there is some way I can feel it by touch, as opposed to looking for something silk screened on it as I'm fumbling in my, as someone on the stage is basically berating me from the stage, and everybody else is TikToking me being berated from the stage for not having turned off my phone.
Sounds like a fever dream. It sounds terrifying.
Patti LuPone, you know what? You don't take any chances when Patti LuPone is in the cast. You just.
Oh dear. I'm curious, Alex, what are the benefits of periscope camera that we sort of don't have right now? Because right now the options are make even bigger sort of lenses, and perhaps even have something that zooms out from the body. But by doing a periscope lens, we can fit more in. What are we doing with that?
Sensor size.
Okay.
You can make the sensor size. If it's not flat, you can make the sensor size potentially larger. So you could make the sensor size larger. You can change what the focal length, but the potential focal length is of the lens through that reflector. So I think that those are the two big reasons that you'd look at a periscope.
Yeah. Optically, this is why like a telephoto lens is physically longer than like a non-telephoto lens, because optically you just need that distance between the lens element and the sensor. One of the things about the periscope lens is that you can basically still have that distance, but basically because you're doing it flatter, it's just simply bending. It's a flat throw, and it's bending through the lens at its usual place. So this is why like some cameras have like a 20x optical zoom, which which is something that you're like, oh God, this is just a phone camera after all. Why would anybody? That's ridiculous. They're just trying to like win the ratings game. But then you have your hand like, oh my God, I can actually take pictures of stuff that I couldn't take pictures of before. This is
the problem is that like 3x seemed like absurd, and now I use it all the time. And I'm like, I just wish it was 5x. Like, why can't I have 5x? You know, and so it's
like, and then it's like 20x plus really good AI enhancement. So like now like the 50x digital is like not garbage anymore. And so now you're like, oh yay, there's a thicker lens module. Oh yay, there's a third like periscope lens. Like I will give you an extra $200 for that.
I'm very cost insensitive, or not cost insensitive, but size insensitive. Like I don't care how big that little. It's 99% of my pictures.
Right.
Yeah. I want that. You know, you can if that stuck out twice as much as it does right now, wouldn't bother me at all. I
got 3 millimeters in my pocket. Okay, it's not as though like I can't fit an extra 3 millimeters.
That's not acceptable. Like where am I supposed to put this thing? Like there are no pockets here. I mean, the thing that I'm really annoyed about is apparently they're getting rid of purple. They're making it dark red. Like what? No, sorry. Like purple, purple is the best. Though it does look from the report that they're going to change the mute switch from a switch into a button, so you can still press the button when your phone goes off. But like the mute button doesn't actually work when it comes to things like the alarms and so on. So yeah, I'm not quite sure.
Could get a little confusing.
But it make it smaller, so maybe next year I don't need the MagSafe pop socket, so I can actually hold my phone.
That would be nice.
That would be good. I mean, they got rid of the mini. They're going to have to do something at some point, I hope.
All righty. I think let's hit one more story and then we'll take a break. So I remember reading about GM making the choice to, in its future EV models, ditch support for CarPlay and Android Auto. And there have been lots of complaints about their decision to do that, where a lot of folks feel like they would like to be able to use their projection system of choice. And the reason for folks who might not know out there who are listening, we call it a projection system, is because it's not built into the car, it's built into your phone. And when you plug in your phone projects that UI into the car's dash, wherever you happen to have that screen or screens, and then displays it there, and then interfaces with the vehicle to do music playback and all of the other features. And of course, we've seen that CarPlay is supposed to be getting even more powerful over time, or at least adding more features over time. And Android Auto continues to improve as well. Now, there's been a conversation between Is it MKBHD? I always get those letters mixed up. The YouTube guy, and he's talking to Rivian's CEO. Sorry, I'm out of touch. Anyway, he's talking with Rivian's CEO about CarPlay and how it's not part of Rivian. And Rivian's CEO is going, well, we're really not planning on adding CarPlay, and we've got a very good reason. And that reason is because they feel like they can make changes to the system on their own much faster than if they wait for CarPlay to make those changes. And okay, yes.
As somebody who actively refuses to use, I have a Renault and I don't use any of the native Renault features on my car at all. Like the only way that I interact with my car is basically open the CarPlay bit, please. Thank you. That's it. I don't want car manufacturers deciding that they know better. For me, especially as Apple is doing like the whole car integration thing, which, they're going to work with multiple car manufacturers on. Like that seems way better. I can plug my phone into any car and I have my entire address book, and it's not synced and stored on some server with people who were car manufacturers. We're not technology people, so maybe they don't actually understand security. Yeah, that seems better to me. I trust Apple. I don't trust car manufacturers.
Jason, were those chirps and squeals coming from you?
Oh man, yes, I was groaning. You got me. When you said the head of Rivian's software gave reasons why, he didn't give any reasons. His reason was, we want to be the head chef. That's not a reason. We want to be the head chef, or we want to do updates. I'll just say it. You can be the head chef of your software and do updates to your software.
True.
And still allow CarPlay and Android Auto. Also, Android Automotive, which GM is going to use, there are lots of cars with Android Automotive now. They all offer CarPlay and Android Auto. all these car makers can do. So now Rivian is doing what GM did, which is they can put out excuses, but I'll just point out nothing that they say precludes also allowing users to bring their smartphones with them to use for the features that they want that are on their smartphone that aren't on the car, or that, I'm not going to have to change the platform that I use, change the apps that I use in order to fulfill your needs. And none of this is true. So when they say they want to be the head chef, that's not what he's actually meaning. What he's meaning is, I want no other chefs but me.
Yeah.
I want to be the only chef.
Yep.
The head chef implies that there are other chefs, but Rivian is not letting the other chefs, which would be Android Auto and CarPlay, into the kitchen. I don't know where, in the end, those chefs are in a cup holder in your dash or something instead, or let them eat Bluetooth, which is a substandard kind of a way to do it because you don't have the interface. And it's like, again, I don't have a problem with Rivian and Tesla and even GM saying, look, we take great pride in our own software. I have a problem with the fact that they don't take enough pride in their software, that they feel like they can't compete with... And they want the control, right? Like either they can't feel like they can't compete, or they feel like they want to put their users in a box where they have to stay in the box. And then, in GM's case, it's very clear. Then they monetize the box. Then they charge you for features in the box
from the chef.
And yeah, oh, that's right. It's more like a doggy bag. Am I right? Anyway, it's all BS, because the fact is they could coexist with those projection systems and still offer what they want to offer. What they don't want to say is, we would rather force you to only use our software because we're threatened by Apple and Google, or we don't want to compete with them when we start to upsell you on connectivity or premium features. These are the reasons. But the truth is, and I wrote about this, I ranted about this on my website last week too. This is what I wanted to say is, the truth is, our smartphones are our ride or die, literally our ride or die. It's not our car. A car is never going to be your primary platform for all of this stuff. It's going to be on your phone, and then you're going to go in your car, and car makers hate that. They hate the idea that they can't control you because you have a device that you love more than your car. But we all do, and that's not going to change. So the right thing to do for customers is to let us have our little podcast app of choice that plays in a little window on your wonderful infotainment system. And then, maybe we'll use your system for other stuff too. And then some people won't use CarPlay, and that's fine too, but give us the choice. And they don't want to. They're playing games because they don't want to give people the choice.
And the problem is that they have to figure out how to do good interfaces, and Apple's pretty good at it. And so the problem is that you really have, like, I'm used to having, I have a portable Gordon Ramsay, for my meals, right? That's what I have. I have Gordon Ramsay. No, I'm saying that as an iPhone.
Oh, the chef.
I have Gordon, the chef. I have Gordon Ramsay, and I'm like, I walk into McDonald's, which is one of the cars, and I go, I'm just going to eat Gordon Ramsay. I'm going to sit here, but I'm going to eat Gordon Ramsay.
Yeah. You get to have Gordon Ramsay.
And so they're like, and you go to a nice restaurant. They go, well, we have a really nice restaurant. We've really upgraded our menu. And like, yeah, but I got Gordon Ramsay making food for me. Like, I don't need your thing. So, and the problem is they can never become Gordon Ramsay because the people who have Gordon Ramsay aren't going to eat anywhere else, so they're going to be like, they're just going to be like, he's pretty good, and so you have to be better than him. It's not that you have to be equal to him. For the people who have, because their habit formed, they are used to Gordon Ramsay. They like Gordon Ramsay. It's really good. You might be able to do better than Gordon Ramsay, but wow, you have to be a lot better.
Right, I'll try your tuna tartare, but I'm probably going to go back to Gordon Ramsay.
And if they hired a UI designer to make it look good on the plate, then there's a chance that I would actually look at it for more than half a second before going, no thanks, moving on.
No, but the problem is that if you make it really good, they're going to go, well, this just looks like the Gordon Ramsay stuff.
Yeah,
I like the Gordon Ramsay stuff. And so the thing is that there's not, and so the problem is that they can't get good at it if people can choose, because people like me jump in and go, well, I'm just going to put Gordon Ramsay on. Like, I'm not going to, like, I don't need to figure this out anymore. And every car I go to, and what's essentially happened is it's turned them into a shell for Apple, which is that they don't, there's not a lot of difference between cars. I have to say, like, we talk about a lot of differences in cars, but until you get to the high end, the difference between cars between 20 grand and 60 grand is very low, except for their, the creature comforts. And when you go over that, there's definitely some things that get better, and there's style that you might like, and so on and so forth. But a lot of times, people really, what we really care about is the radio, and we're listening to things. I mean, that's the thing that impacts us is all of those things. And I think that they're going to have a really hard time. And the problem they also have is that people care, for all manufacturers, people care less and less about their car. The next generation doesn't care about their car at all. They went up, they grew up in this, the executives grew up in a time when your car, like when you were 16 years old, what kind of car are you going to get? And now it's like, do I get a better phone? And people pay attention to, a lot of things like that, but they're not paying attention to the cars anymore. It's hard to persuade my kids to want to have a license. I want them to have a license so that they can start driving themselves. When my son turned 16, he was like, I don't know. I don't know if I need one. Because I'm like, yeah, you do.
You do, because I'm not driving you around anywhere.
Going, me not having to pick you up all the time. But the kids aren't that interested in it. So the thing is that interface becomes more and more important because they're trying to figure out, how do we monetize it? How do we make it better? How do we do all these other things? And they're in a shrinking island of kids that don't need it. And if Apple and Google actually release cars and everybody's using that interface, it gets really complicated because people don't care about the car at all. And they're like, oh, I could just have the same interface I had on this car, but now on an Apple car. They're going to just move over. And so I think that the large interface that Apple showed actually scared a lot of car manufacturers. I think that was one of those things that they were like, whoa, this is way, being a little screen on your car was okay. Them saying, and we're going to take over the whole car. I think that's when they said, oh, let's put the brakes on this. And so I think that's what's happening.
Sorry, I had to laugh at your pun. Put the brakes on it.
There you go. I slid it right in there.
Yeah. See, it was good. It was good. All right, let's take a quick break before we come back with just a little bit more. I do want to tell you about ZipRecruiter. You've heard of them, and they're bringing you this episode of MacBreak Weekly. Did you know it can actually take up to 11 weeks on average to hire for an open position? 11 weeks. That's almost 2.5 months. So if you're hiring for a growing business, you don't really have much time to wait. You need to hop on it. Well, if you're listening today, I've got some advice for you. Stop waiting and start using ZipRecruiter. ZipRecruiter can help you find qualified candidates for all your roles fast. And right now, you can try it for free at ziprecruiter.com/MacBreak. So how is ZipRecruiter so efficient at helping you hire? Well, it uses powerful matching technology to quickly find and send you the most qualified people for your roles. You can check out the people that ZipRecruiter sends you, and if you really like one or two, you can personally invite them to apply with one click, which may make them apply even sooner. They go, oh, they want me to come work for them. Absolutely. I'm going to hop on this as quick as I can. Plus, here's how quickly ZipRecruiter can work to help you hire. 4 out of 5 employers who post on ZipRecruiter get a quality candidate within the first day. I remember Lisa looking for someone to fill the job. And it was funny because I'm in the office here in the studio, and I hear her go by talking about how she was looking for someone. She left the studio. She came back later that day and she's like, oh, I've got somebody coming in later today to talk about this position. Within the same day, was able to find a qualified candidate. It's incredible. So don't wait that 2.5 months. Speed up your hiring process with ZipRecruiter. See why 3.8 million businesses have come to ZipRecruiter for their hiring needs. Just go to this exclusive web address to try ZipRecruiter for free. It's ziprecruiter.com/MacBreak. Again, that's ziprecruiter.com/MacBreak. ZipRecruiter, the smartest way to hire. And thank you, ZipRecruiter, for sponsoring this week's episode of MacBreak Weekly. All right, back from the break, and I've got one quick silly little story before we get into our tips and picks. I guess it's not really a silly little story. It's kind of a ridiculous big story. Burglars said, you know what? I would like to take a bunch of stuff from Apple. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a store that maybe didn't have as great of security. This is kind of like, this is a great metaphor for password management, where you think that you've got a great password system in place. You know, you've got Fort Knox that is your, I don't even know if that's a good example anymore. Am I old and saying Fort Knox? Anyway, that is your Apple ID and password. But because you also used the password that you used for your Apple ID at some local ice cream store that doesn't have any cybersecurity, your password got stolen and now your account's been hacked. I think the same thing applies here. You go to a store that's not as protected as Apple, and then you just cut a hole in the wall and you climb through and steal $500,000 worth of products. So yes, burglars in the Alderwood Mall in Washington went into an espresso machine store. Yep. Which, if you walk away with enough of those, you could probably also walk away with $500,000 worth of supplies now that I think about it.
I mean, it depends if they're good or not as to whether or not you'd be able to easily move them.
That's like 3 espresso machines.
Yeah, right? Isn't it? So they cut through the wall into, it looks like the bathroom in the Apple store and made off with 436 iPhones, some iPads and some Apple Watches that totaled about $500,000. And there were no fingerprints left behind. So now I'm kind of wondering if this might be a viral marketing campaign for the next Apple TV Plus show.
It feels to me like they were watching a lot of films. Like I remember an episode of Diagnosis Murder where they are using, like they managed to get a hotel locked down with like an infectious disease or something, and they use that time to try and tunnel into the bank next door and steal stuff from the vault. Like it feels like the episode of a TV show or film, what they've done here. And
they did it really well. It looks
they did, but I wonder if the espresso machines had serial numbers, because if not, they should have taken those, because all the phones can be blocked and locked by Apple. An espresso machine, does it have a Wi-Fi connectivity module? Are they going to be able to disable that so you can't make an espresso somewhere else?
A 24 by 18 hole. Go ahead.
I don't know, because I when I read this article, I thought about it, and because I was like, why would you do that? Because these are smart devices and so on and so forth. But I'm not sure that what Apple can do if the box hasn't been opened. So I'm not 100% sure.
They scan the box number when they sell it to you, though, in store. So like they know what is in inventory there, and they scan it, and that's then linked to you. So they must have an inventory of what's in the store.
But I think that this might be the two-edged sword related to Apple's privacy. So while they scan that, they track them definitely in the store, and they definitely know which ones are gone.
Until it's been linked to an Apple ID, right? That's what you're wondering.
Well, and they don't, and Apple does everything it can not to hang on to any of that data. Mm-hmm. So they're not going to go after that data, because they don't want consumers thinking about that. They'd rather just take the insurance money for the $500,000 worth of hardware and move on than have Apple's not going after these. I mean, they may go after these. They'll work with the authorities. They'll give them the information that they need. You're in much more danger. It's when people go through the front door and they steal the stuff off the counters, you're toast. Like they just track you home, they track you to your car, they track you to whatever, you're done. It is but when they pull them, what was ingenious about what happened here is that they pulled them while they're still in boxes. They haven't been unlocked. They haven't been registered to anyone. I don't know if they don't get away with this. I don't know what they're worth. I don't know but I think that they might actually get away with it because I think it's because of Apple's own privacy policies. And they don't want to, they wouldn't want to cross that and have a big thing of, we would chase them down by looking at their phone, because consumers won't know the difference. They'll just go, Apple knows where I am on all my phones and, everything else. And so I think they might get away with it.
I don't know that it's even that sophisticated. I think that when you're trying to sell these iPads that you stole, it's like you're presenting the prospective buyer with, here is a brand new, still in shrink wrap, latest model iPad, and then they take the shrink wrap off, they take it home, and wow, look, I'm getting it. It has everything is brand new and untouched, and they tried to set it up, and it will take a while before if it's blocked from being used. And because these people who stole these things, they're not really into customer service. It's not their concern if this thing doesn't work after that. I mean,
it is ultimately, as much as there is the funny to it, and we've been laughing. There is what Andy's talking about there, which is there are probably people in the end who unfortunately will be it's a double crime, because you're stealing from this company in the first place, but then later when you choose to resell it to make money, then the person who's purchased it from you is also then harmed by that. So
I'm not clear that they will. Maybe they can't it might be that they won't be able to register to iCloud, because it wants that information or something like that. But again, I'm not 100% clear that that'll happen. And the other thing we have to remember is that it's probably not going to be resold where it was stolen. It's going to be resold in Asia. It's going to be resold in Africa. The phones themselves are far more valuable there than they are in the place that it was stolen. So most likely it'll find its way out.
So I remember I came to San Francisco for WWDC, and it was before Apple had added activation lock to their devices, and I had an iPad, and it was stolen from me while I was in San Francisco at I think it was at the Beard Bash at the time, throwback, and some member of the staff stole my iPad. And again, before activation lock, when I called Apple, because I had AT&T insurance for it, so I was able to get a replacement, no big deal. But I called Apple, and they actually just asked me for the serial number. And they at the time, what they told me was, if it ever gets brought into an Apple store and we see that serial number, then we'll know it's stolen. But yeah, I ultimately don't know. We don't know.
And again, there's huge chunks of the world that don't have an Apple store. So you look at Africa, there's like 3 Apple stores in Africa, like official Apple stores in Africa. Yeah. And so there's, so it can go to a lot of places in the world where people will just use it and it won't make any difference. And so I think that's I think that they, again, they may still get caught because it's really complicated to move that kind of merchandise. Yeah. But I don't think that Apple necessarily can out of hand, chase after them. Yeah. I will say that it is fun. We've had people someone stole a laptop from one of our productions and it has tracking.
Yeah, that's fun. I knew exactly
and we were able to ascertain that they gave it to their son. Their son, we knew where they lived, where their ex-wife lived. We knew all their businesses. We knew everything about them. We didn't do anything about it because it was it's too much trouble. Like I'm not gonna, it was too much trouble to do it, but we did figure out where everything was. And so it's gotten less and less fun to steal electronics from people, and it's going to continue to get harder. And so, but I think this might be the one place that you can do those things.
Though I think Apple will work with their authorized retailers and the authorized service repair folks in various countries that don't have Apple stores. And even in the countries that do have Apple stores, for the case where, your iPad was stolen and then, somebody's bringing it in to have it repaired because they broke the screen on it or something after it's been resold. But I understand. I think that Apple would probably rather take a bit of a hit with the insurance company and still have people able to activate the iPhone and use it. It's like Windows when people were upgrading their hacked or dodgy Windows licenses. They just gave them an official Windows license for Windows 10 or whatever it was so that they could get one for free.
And this is like a millisecond of Apple's revenue. It's just,
right. That's true. That's a good point.
So it's kind of like, yeah, we'll see. I don't think anyone's, other than them figuring out, let's not do that. I imagine that the stores, after they get done with all the meetings about unionization, are going to have meetings about what retailers are next to us, and reinforcing walls next.
Yeah, exactly.
Reinforcing walls next to other retailers.
Got new walls.
I bet you there's going to be a lot of. I wouldn't be surprised if they don't reinforce where they store product. This is the kind of thing Apple would do, is take the insurance, but a year from now it's reinforced steel. So if you cut through something, you're going to end up with something that there's alarms going off and there's other things going on. So Apple will do something over time, but I think that in this case,
I think they already do have differences in Apple stores in the back area of some stores where stuff will be in locked metal cages or similar, so that you can't just walk into the back area and grab an iPhone and walk out.
It's just that I think they haven't thought, this is how things happen in development, is that they haven't thought about someone cutting through the bathroom.
Clearly they need to watch more detective films, because I've seen that in a number of things.
Exactly. There's so many of them.
I was going to recommend, speaking of heists, please, if you haven't seen 2006's Spike Lee movie Inside Man, it's sort of like this, and it's great. So you should check it out. There's my movie recommendation. It's a movie pick, Mikah. I did a movie pick.
Well, speaking of picks, that's where we need to move next, to the MacBreak Weekly picks. And we are kicking things off with Alex Lindsay.
I'd like to thank Hasmukh Gajar for sending me. He sent a friend of mine from South Africa he said, you got to watch for your mail, and it showed up, and it is. Let's see if I have another one in the box right now, but it is this is a Peak Designs wireless charging vent mount, and I think it's very perfect for today's conversation about GM. This is the best. I put one in one of the cars already and put in the second one in. This is the best mount from a vent that I've ever seen. So here's what makes it different. A lot of them, if I've been mounting phones to my air vents and rental car air vents for a long time. This one, this Peak Design one, it has a little pincher like all the other ones that pinches onto it, but it's got this adjustable hook that hooks onto the back of the air vent, and then you tighten it, and it just goes and just becomes part of that air vent. Now, I imagine if I tightened it too much, it would probably break it. But I tightened it up, and then you can rotate it around and then tighten it up, and it stays exactly where it is. The magnet is now. I happen to have a Peak Design case, so that's part of the thing. So I take my little wallet off, and this snaps on, and it becomes like part of that. And it has a USB-C connection to charge, so it comes with a little charger. Or you can't get the one I have anyway. The one, but that you can charge it in the so you can run your cable up to it. You can attach it to the vent, and then you can. Not only does it hold it as a magnet, but it's charging it at the same time. And I was a little incredulous when I got it. I was like, we'll see how this goes. I love it. So it is a really great one, and what we'll all be using in GM cars when they in 2024.
Yeah, I've been trying to keep that in mind. I'm a person, I will ride a car until it is absolutely not able to be used anymore.
Me too. I'm
So it'll be a while before I do that again. But I've been thinking about what am I going to do in the next vehicle that I have if everybody's going the way of no CarPlay. So yeah, I've been kind of checking out different mounts that I think are acceptable for the future.
Yeah, I already have I have an old car that doesn't. I mean, the one that I drive around a lot is an old car without any stuff. It's got a CD player, and I've used the CD player as a mount for my phone and iPad. But this is going to be an upgrade, to that. But I think it's pretty nifty.
All right, let's go to Rosemary Orchard here in the studio for the next pick.
All right. Well, my next pick, I had about a bajillion things because we did what's in my bag for iOS today. But my pick for today are the Sony, and I love the naming here. This is the WHM 1000 MX, whatever it is. It's the 5 series wireless noise canceling headphones. These are just some very comfy wireless headphones. But I have to say, the reason why I upgraded to these is I have tried AirPods Max, and I love the feature where you put them on, and then you take them off and they pause. These have that feature built in. They also have the feature built in where when they're on your head, you can actually just put your hand over one of the sides, and then it will, basically turn it from noise canceling into the ambient sound version. So if somebody's talking to you very briefly, like, would you like another glass of water? You can just, put your hand over it without pulling your headphones off, and you'll be able to hear everything while it's talking. And I have to say, like, the case on this, like, it seems like it's a little bigger than the previous versions of the Sony headphones, but it's not, because it's tapered at the top, but it does have a handy dandy little pocket inside, which comes with the 3.5 millimeter cable adapter, because it still has a 3.5 millimeter cable in there, and a USB charging cable. But it's also the perfect place to put my 12 South AirFly Duo and a little AirTag as well, so that I won't lose these. And I also usually chuck a remote control in so that I can then play and pause whatever I'm watching, wirelessly without reaching. But there's an accessibility feature, which I mentioned on iOS today for that. But like, these are, they're not like the cheapest headphones, but they are cheaper than AirPods Max. And they are comfortable. I find them really comfortable to wear. So yeah, they're definitely worth considering, and come in 3 colors now, which is great. So
nice. I think I could get a new kidney for cheaper than AirPods Max. All right, let's go to Andy Ihnatko.
We're having I'm in an odd position because I picked my pick is something I feel really strongly about. It's something that I absolutely love. I came across it like last week, and brother Jason reminded me that, hey, this was my pick like 3 or 4 weeks ago, and apparently
I endorse this pick, Andy. It's a great pick. Go for it.
I also endorse this pick.
So my pick is Jason's pick. I'm endorsing Jason's pick. So go from 3 shows ago. You want to watch?
I picked Skeletor.
Reference acknowledged.
Well, I can't support that. I believe that I don't think that I support his agenda at all. But yeah, okay. Getting to it, I've the Camo app for controlling basically any source of video that your Mac will recognize and using it as a video source for streaming or for capture. It's exactly what I was looking for. Of course, I'll make this short because I'm sure that Jason covered it really, really well. But what I'm looking for in these things is that like the biggest piece of annoyance is that like I've got things set up, like I'm sitting down and when I sit down, it's like this. And so like in the olden days, it's like, okay, I better move the camera so I'm like a little bit closer to this, or like it's a little bit tilted, or it's like my framing is a little bit off. And so the ability to, and the lighting is a little bit weird, the ability to like basically have sliders that let me control like pretty much everything that's here. From I want to make sure that I'm zoomed in properly. I want to make sure that the framing is exactly what I want to be. Oh no, the camera's a little bit off kilter. Oh no, I can't do that. But and I want to be able to control like what the image looks like without having to. I've got lights on. I've got some windows open, but I want to. That doesn't look good. I want to be able to adjust things as I go. That basically saves me a whole bunch of problems. And being able to save that as a preset, the ability to then even like use LUTs if I've got like my nice Olympus camera as a webcam. Really, really great. And it's $5. It's free with a lot of its good features enabled. $5 a month if you just want to try like the Unlocked Pro edition on a month-to-month basis. $40 a year, or buy the entire thing outright for like $70, $80. And it's been around for a while. And another thing I love about it, I'm not sure if Jason talked about this, but like there is actually on their website the Camo manifesto that actually says here's our roadmap for this product. And it's not like, hey, we promised this by X date. Hey, we promised this by Y date. Hey, here's why we didn't actually ship on time. It's more like here's where we want to go for this. Here's some features that we definitely want to support. We don't know when we're going to support that, but that's some of the stuff we're working on. So it's not one of these things where you find it in the App Store. You don't know whether this is just one very, very clever person's weekend project to fix a problem they were having, or whether this really is something that's been around for 3 years and it's going to be around for another 5 years. So very, very high recommendation. Again, my Jason's picks are my pick. So it'll be a meta pick. It'll be my fractal pick of this week.
I double checked, and I've been using Camo on iOS today since October of 2020. Nice. And it has been fantastic. And in fact, I remember talking about it on Smart Tech Today was where it first came up, a show that I used to host here on the network. And the CEO of Reincubate, who makes Camo, reached out and was, because I had some concerns. I'm going, how are they able to do this where it's just almost a direct feed from the camera? Surely there's some weirdness going on here where I don't know, I feel kind of uncomfortable about it. The CEO reached out directly and explained sort of the behind the scenes stuff that Apple makes available that a lot of these apps were just not using. And so once I understood how it worked and I, started talking with him a little bit, I thought, oh, this is actually fantastic. And now, since then they've released an Android version, they've made it compatible with Windows. And then as you mentioned, they just recently released a new version that supports all sorts of cameras, not just your iPhone as a camera, so that you can make adjustments and controls with any camera that you're using. And I think it's an excellent tool.
Continuity camera is great if you have an iPhone, and if you have an iPhone that is compatible with it. This will work with like a lot of iPhones that aren't compatible with continuity camera. It'll also work with Android phones, and it will also like choose. Hey, I see you have 3 lenses. I'll let you choose whichever lens you want. I will if you like continuity camera features, we will just simply attach it as a continuity camera and not put our own elf and magic on it. It is this. I'm very impressed by the fact that they allow you to have an intense level of control over what's going on without making it look like, oh my God, I've got a new responsibility every week, which is to manage this incredibly intense and app that I have no idea how to use. You can just plug it in and go. But then when there's something you don't like about your image, you know that there's a slider or a checkbox somewhere that lets you fix it.
All right. Let us go to our final pick, which comes from Jason.
You've saved the best and most relevant to how we live today. For me, I decided to get super nerdy this time because why not? Every now and then I get to do that here. You can leave your computing platforms behind, but they never really leave you. They leave their marks on you and you'll never forget them. And that's why I'd like to recommend for anybody who is like me, part of the Apple II generation, an amazingly good Mac app called Virtual 2. It is the definitive Apple II emulator. I actually spent a bunch of time pulling all my old floppy disks off through an Apple IIc and getting disk images of them. So I have like all the papers I wrote in high school and stuff, which was great. Having a high school kid, I was able to say, hey, this is badly written, but that's okay. I'm a professional writer and you should have seen the crap that I wrote in high school. So anyway, it's really good. You can print, you can open up the disk images and just pull the text files off. You can print to a text file. And you know what the most important thing about the Apple II was? You can play games on it. You can play any game on it. It's got support. The latest version of Virtual 2 supports gamepads, so you can use a modern console controller like an Xbox or PlayStation controller to play Lode Runner if you want to. And I recommend it because I think the Apple II Lode Runner is the best Lode Runner there. I said it. But you can do, whether it's Apple Writer or Print Shop or Ultima 4, Quest for the Avatar, they're all there in beautiful monochromatic or color glory, depending, because you can set it. And yes, you can crank up the virtualization speed if you want to, so that time flows at approximately 20 seconds for every second. I don't recommend you do that on games because you'll lose, but on other things, it's pretty amazing to press return and just boom, everything happens, because our computers in emulation today are about like 1 billion times faster than the Apple II. So anyway, Virtual 2, it's nice to see an indie developer who built this thing out of love. And I love it. And if you remember the Apple II, you will love it too.
Dude, I have a crack for Dazzle Draw. Email me on Genie and I'll send it to you. I'll send you a copy. Just send me a blank floppy, man.
You just got to log into my my cat send line, and I've put a floppy disk up for you to download of it. So that'll be cool.
I really want to do the dial-up sound now, but I can't do that.
That would be kind of difficult.
I can't do it.
It is the Chewbacca scream of the nerdly 80s generation.
All righty, folks. That is bringing us to the end of this episode of MacBreak Weekly. Rosemary Orchard, thank you so much for your time today. If folks want to follow you online, check out your work, and perhaps see your other shows, where should they go to do that?
Well, one of those shows is right here on the TWiT network. That's iOS Today. But other than that, you can find all the things I do at rosemaryorchard.com, which has links to podcasts, books, apps, etc. And all the social media links are at the bottom.
Awesome. And let's go to who's over there to the right of you. Jason Snell. Tell us about where they can, where folks can find you. And
they can find me at sixcolors.com and podcasts at Relay FM and theincomparable.com. And we mentioned it earlier. I played Dungeons and Dragons with both Mikah and Rosemary. That's the Total Party Kill podcast, theincomparable.com/TPK. Check that out. We're all in there, along with lots of other people you may know, and but not Alex or Andy yet.
Dun dun dun.
I feel like we need to rectify that.
Bats. All right, to my left, it's Andy Ihnatko, WGBH in Boston. Ooh, tell us where we can find you.
Actually, my next GBH is actually on Thursday, live from the Boston Public Library Studios at 12:30 in the afternoon. If you're in Boston, come on over, buy yourself a cookie and a cup of coffee and watch the show. And if you aren't in Boston or you just aren't that interested, you can stream it at wgbhnews.org live or later. Or because this is going to be streaming on YouTube, you can go to the WGBH News channel on YouTube and stream it later if you like.
Awesome. And last but certainly not least, Alex Lindsay of officehours.global. Tell us where folks can find you. I have a guess.
NAB's next week.
Oh.
Just you can find me at NAB, definitely. My first conference that I've gone to, I went to SVB, but this is my first big conference that I'm going back to after COVID. I'm speaking like 6 times. I will not be here next week, but we will be covering NAB with 50 people. So we've got about 15 on the ground, 35 in the cloud that are working on coverage. It's going to be nutty. We're having a ton of VOD stuff that goes up on our YouTube channel, We're going to have 4 to 6 hours of live streaming. And then we're also going to have an after hours. We're going to have a Zoom room open for 8 hours a day where people on the ground are just saying, hey, I'm at this booth with my phone and do you want to see some cool things and everything else. And so we're kind of experimenting with how far you can take event coverage. So if you're interested in that, check out officehours.club.
Beautiful. And last but oh, wait, I've already done that one. So, and also last,
how about yourself?
But perhaps least, Mikah Sargent, you can find him. That's me. At Mikah Sargent on many a social media network. Of course, check out iOS Today with Rosemary Orchard, which we recorded this morning. Ask the Tech Guys, a special episode last week called Ask the Tech Geeks. And also playing Dungeons and Dragons, as was mentioned. I'm in a lot of places online. Just go to chihuahua.coffee, CHIHUA.coffee, where I've got links to the places I am most active. Folks, please consider tuning in to watch the show live as we record it by going to twit.tv/live, round about 11 a.m. Pacific, more like 11:30 a.m. Pacific, where we record this show live every Tuesday. I'll be back with you next week, but Leo will be returning soon, so we're in knot. And if you want to subscribe to the show or follow the show, go to twit.tv/MBW. There is how you can click to subscribe to audio or video using your platform of choice: Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube. It's all of those places.
Yeah, take that, General Motors.
Aha! Yes. We've got choice here. Choices. So please do consider subscribing to the show. And hey, if you'd like to support the network and help us continue to make all of this possible, please consider joining Club Twit at twit.tv/clubtwit. There you will find the option to subscribe for starting at $7 a month or $84 a year. You can subscribe to the club. You get every single Twit show with no ads when you subscribe. You also get access to the members-only Twit Plus bonus feed that has extra content you won't find anywhere else. Behind the scenes, before the show, after the show, special Twit events that are not available to folks who are not subscribed and who aren't members of the club. You can also join the Club Twit Discord. That is a fun place to go to chat with your fellow Club Twit members and also those of us here at Twit. Share fun animated images, have lots of conversations. It is a doggone good time there in the Club Twit Discord. Again, starting at $7 a month, twit.tv/clubtwit. And when you do, you get access to some great Club Twit exclusive shows, including the Untitled Linux Show, which is, as you might imagine, a show all about Linux. Paul Thurrott's Hands on Windows, which many of you watching this are going, why is he talking about Windows? Don't worry. We've also got Hands on Mac, which is my show, a short format show that covers all things Apple, all the devices, little tips and tricks about each and every aspect of those devices, and the newly relaunched Home Theater Geeks with Scott Wilkinson. So if any of those shows sound good to you, please consider joining the club, twit.tv/clubtwit. Thank you all for tuning in to this episode of MacBreak Weekly. I'll see you again next week. And I guess it's time to say, get back to work, because break time is over. Goodbye.
Do you want to hear about the latest news happening in the tech world from the people who write the articles, sometimes from the people who are actually making the news? Well, we got a show for you here at twit.tv. It's called Tech News Weekly. Me, Jason Howell, and my co-host Mikah Sargent, we talk with some amazing people each and every Thursday on Tech News Weekly, and we share a little bit of our own insights in each of us bringing a story of the week. That's at twit.tv/TNW. Subscribe right now.